But thank you everyone for coming today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tommy Lim, and I'm the Managing Director of the mortgage broking firm SF Capital. And of course, we're co-hosting today in conjunction with Jesse Davidson and his team at AuctionWORKS. So at SF Capital, you might know a lot of mortgage brokers, but we really focus on three things. The first is service, so SF stands for Service First. The second is education, and that is this event today. And the third is problem solving. Where other brokers are hungry for a sale, we love the challenging deal and cracking open a hard case. And currently, one of the toughest problems is the Sydney housing market. Did you know in the 1980s, the average house price was $80,000 and around 5 times a person's average income? Today, it's grown 17 times that, and it's 14 times the average household income. This is a big change, and it means Sydney is a very competitive market. And for better or for worse, a lot of the in-demand properties go to auction. And like Jesse knows this, he runs them. I've been to a few. For a lot of clients, especially if you're a first home buyer, auctions can be an intimidating environment. And so our goal at SF Capital is to give you the edge, to calm you down in those environments and see those as an opportunity. And of course, to bring in the experts who really know how to operate and what to do in those instances. So there's no one better than Jesse. Don't let his boyish looks fool you. He is a 16-year auctioneer and started in 2009.
2008, and then 2009 I started officially, yes.
So he's worked at AuctionWORKS since 2009, and in 2018 took over the business from his mentor, David Scholes. So he's the chief auctioneer and principal of AuctionWORKS, and he is highly regarded in the industry, guys. In 2015, he was the winner of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales Auctioneer of the Year, and he's been the chair of the Auctioneers chapter since 2015 to 2019. But most of all, SF Capital is a sponsor of the room, especially on Tuesdays, where we're here for the commercial auctions. And truly, Jesse is a master of his craft. His product knowledge, ability to tailor the experience for his clients, their vendors and real estate agents, as well as the people in the room. Timing, ability to chuck in the odd joke to calm people down.
A few jokes.
Yep, is second to none.
Hey.
Andre, good to see you. But not only that, it's not just about calling bids and knocking down the hammer. He is a master of psychology and understanding the sales environment. This is what I have learnt most about Jesse and AuctionWORKS sitting in the back of the room, and this lets him get outstanding results for his clients. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off.
Love it.
It's going to work as a Q&A where I'll get the ball rolling.
Beautiful.
We've got 5 auction-winning strategies which we see in both residential and commercial auctions, and then we'll throw it over to you guys to ask questions. But look, if anyone has a question in the middle, just jump in.
Yeah.
This is. How long have you been in this space?
We've been in this room for 12 years. I've just renegotiated our release, which is always an exciting process for anybody that's done that in their business. So we'll be here for another 3. So by the time that's concluded, we will have spent 15 years here in this spot. We just got new carpet the other day, so feel free to comment on it if you'd like.
Get out your social media
cameras. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, so feel free to jump in. Like this is especially amongst commercial agents, this is a very well-known location. It was even in Lux Listings. My wife and I watched it.
It was in Lux
Listings. With Leanne.
Yes, yeah, exactly right.
All right, we'll take a seat and kick things off. So if you look into Jesse's profile, he actually grew up in the country, but he's a big-time auctioneer in the city. So how does a country boy become a big city auctioneer?
I grew up in a country town by the name of Young, which is down in the southwest of New South Wales, about 4.5 hours from here, on a farm. My mum and dad are still down there on the farm. I've got 2 brothers, both of them run the farm. There had to be one city boy, and that ended up being me. We went to school up here. I was lucky enough to go to a school called the King's School out in Parramatta. Finished up school and then started playing a bit of footy and doing all sorts of things that we all do when we finish playing school. And then from there, my mentor, who I've been very lucky to know since I was around about 2 years old. In fact, my mentor is my father's best mate. So I've known him since I was tiny. And I spent a lot of time with him, obviously socially. And as a result of that, he invited me at the conclusion of my Bachelor of Business that I was doing post-school. So during that process, asked me to come in and do an auctioneering training with him, which was effectively a fundamentals 7-step process on how to conduct auctions. It's all about presentation, all about the way that we do things and that sort of stuff. I learned a huge amount out of that session, came back about 2 weeks later and we did sort of effectively a mock run of auctions where he liked what I did and offered me a job that day, which was great, and I haven't left. So that's pretty much how I got into it. Obviously my background being from the country, I've had a lot of experience in stock auctions, so sheep and cattle auctions, which is all that sort of Betty bought a bit of butter, that sort of stuff. It's all very fast, not something that we operate here in Sydney. But obviously also doing a fair few clearing sales, those sorts of things, which is a vastly different skill set, but you also learn a lot about the way that people perform. I remember one particular one that I did down in Gundagai where we offered effectively every single thing that people owned in this particular house. And so we'd get to item number 343 of 600 and it was a box full of sunscreen. So you have to suddenly go, ladies and gentlemen, what do we got? I didn't ever know what we'd sell. So you'd open it up, you go, right, I got a bunch of sunscreen. Who's got $1 to start it? $1 away, right side, $1.52, sell it, done, on to the next one. So a vastly different skill set, but I think what I did is learn how to be comfortable in front of crowds, learn how to speak nice and comfortably, but also not to get, I suppose, overawed by a situation where you have a lot of people. I was at a charity gig on Friday night for preterm birth in mothers, which is a big charity that I support called the Born Foundation. You know, they might have had 400 or 500 people there, and I think the more you speak in front of people, the better you get and the more comfortable you are, I suppose. But in terms of auctioneering, it's something that I fell into and haven't left. I absolutely love what I do, which is important. I'm like everybody else, not every day is great, but of course I think I have more good ones than bad ones, and particularly in this job it's a very rewarding job but also a challenging job at times. So I'm very grateful to have the role that I do.
Cool. I'm going to come back to the public speaking later.
Love it.
Yeah, but so you spoke about challenges and it's a tough market out there in Sydney to win a property.
Very much so.
Yeah. So when does a property actually go to auction? How does the real estate agent decide?
How do they decide which ones go?
Yeah.
So I think
I've seen some good ones, like obviously some, and I see some duds.
Yeah.
But
and particularly in this room, right? You would have seen them. I think the biggest thing to understand about properties that suit auction the most are properties with a lack of complexity, if that makes sense. So when you have, for example, in here, we'll talk commercial because we're here today, and we'll get to resi as well, because I know some of you are residential buyers. But let's say you have a commercial shop top housing, which is retail down the bottom with some residential up top. The residential leases are leased out in a per room basis, so it's not really approved in the way that it's being done. The lease downstairs is expired. The tenant sort of wants to stay but doesn't really want to commit to anything. Well, there's some complexity to that. Let's say you get a development site that if the LEP changes in that local community, that it goes from being able to have 30 units on it to 50 units, well, there's a lot of complexity to that. So from a developer's point of view, we sit there and we have to do our feasibilities on whether or not we can have 30 units or 60 units, and that's going to have a vast differential in terms of what we're willing to pay for that particular asset. So I think the best way to answer that question, Tommy, is to say that properties with limited complexity work at auction best. But also there's a multitude of reasons why other properties go to auction as well. Mortgagee in possessions, which is where effectively somebody couldn't pay the mortgage, the bank takes the home. That always goes to auction because the banks need to be seen to be offering their property in an open and transparent environment. Nothing's done behind closed doors, so that if their client ever comes back and says that you undersold it, well, the good news about that is you say, no, we didn't. On the 14th of October, we ran an auction. We invited everybody that was willing to come. We only got 2 people turn up, and the guy that you're saying is complaining, Well, unfortunately, he had an offering to this auction, didn't come and didn't participate, or did come and didn't participate. In other words, was given the opportunity. Of course, divorce cases, unfortunately, I'm seeing a fair bit more of that in the last 6 months, and I don't know if that's a little bit to do with probably the economic conditions. I can't really comment more than that on those, other than the fact that they're a little bit uncomfortable. They happen. Deceased estates are another example. So where somebody has passed away, and there's a multitude of family parties that need to make a decision. And what auction often does is take the decision-making process away from an owner specifically. So it's not one person sitting there and doing it. It's us doing our job, getting as much money as possible, putting that offer to our owners. If they accept it, they accept it. If they don't, they don't. That's the idea of our process. And I think every property suits auction. The price makes no difference. And I won't talk specifically to it because we can't. We hold the Australian record for the highest auction ever, but nobody knows about where it was or what it was. I can tell you it was just over 72 million. So it proved to you that at that price point, there's still no barriers. If you have an auction with as limited complexity as possible, then people are still willing to participate under auction conditions. So that's probably the thing there. And even the one we did last week, I don't even remember when it was, a couple of weeks ago, I saw one in Eastwood, which was, I think, the highest price in Australia this year at 29.8 million. Yeah, so it was actually a sort of a mixed-use investment where who knows what they might do with it, whether they run a pub there, who knows what they're going to do, whether or not they just park it. Eastwood's, for anybody that knows Eastwood, is unlike any market in the world. None of anything that makes sense in real estate makes sense in Eastwood. So when you get prices there, normally you look at the numbers there, it probably should have made 20, 22. In Eastwood, it makes 30. So you go, okay, sweet. And by the way, quite easily. It wasn't an overly difficult auction. And funnily enough, to conclude on that point in terms of price, often the higher priced assets actually perform better at auction, which is strange to think. You typically look at those auctions and say, oh, people at those sort of price brackets won't compete. Even one of the issues can be institutions that don't have approval beyond certain levels, so they've got to go to board approval to get that sort of stuff. That's an example. So long story short, price makes no difference, and it's about the complexity of the property.
So really, I guess it's the real estate agent's job to market it well and simplify the understanding of the deal so that when you get to auction,
totally.
There you go.
And the benefit of auction, right, is, and from an owner's perspective, is that let's say you get an offer in the first 2 weeks that's outstanding. Sell it. You can sell it in 2 weeks if you want to. But if you want to continue to push to try and get active buyers to a point where they push a premium price, run it to auction. But in the event that your property doesn't sell at auction, well, you're going to try and move it in the next 2 weeks, which is what we call the post-auction process. And if you don't mind, I might drop a little bit of data on this at the moment. Now, the clearance rates have skinnied up in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but let's say that our clearance rate residentially at the moment sits at about 62%, which is sort of, you can shift that and change it slightly depending on days and that sort of stuff, but call it 62%. What a lot of people think is that if they're not part of that 62% on auction day, they've been a failed campaign. Statistically, that couldn't be further from the truth. If you include a further 2 weeks post-auction, that clearance rate of 62% goes to 88% in Sydney at the moment, which tells you that a further, it's 26% of properties are selling within 2 weeks of the auction day, which is a staggering number, particularly when the owner thinks that if we don't sell on the day, statistically we're buggered, which is not true. It's just not true. So I think a lot of the time that agents are choosing to use auction, and it is, there's two benefits to it. One, the owner gets the opportunity to get a better price, but also the agent gets an opportunity to meet more buyers, open more doors, and obviously list more business. For them, that's what an auction benefits them to do, and an auction always generates typically more inquiry than a private treaty, and there's only one reason for that. Does anyone want to have a stab at what that is? Only one reason for it. No?
Sticky fee.
Close. Price. They have to call up to ask about the price. So if the agent's putting a price on the ad, typically a good auction agent won't put a price on that ad for the first week or two. And the reason for that is that they want you to pick up the phone, to talk to them, to get your details, and to give them pricing feedback. Because if you're going to run this process and get more inquiry, it means nothing if you're not going to do anything with that added inquiry. So a lot of the time, that's the idea of the process. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Can I ask, is anybody actively looking to buy in the market at the moment? Yeah? How often are you engaging with agents? Perfect. Are you somebody that's quite open to talk to them, or do you want to sit back and hold things a bit closer to yourself?
I'm happy to talk to them.
Yeah, great. And that's the way that we should be. There was a hand up over here. Yes, sir? Similar thing, you're happy to talk. Sir, to you at the back, same thing?
I'm a buyer.
Oh, you're buying. Okay, a little bit different. Perfect. Yeah. So, guys, one of the things that I always say, and typically when you're trying to purchase a property, is go and find out the type of asset that you want in a particular market. Now, if that is a 2-bedroom unit inside of Ryde, right? If it's a 2-bedroom apartment, what you want to find is not the best agent in Ryde, not the agent that writes the most amount of money, because they're probably selling the $3 and $4 and $5 million homes. What you want to find is the agent that is specifically best in your area for selling that exact product, right? That's the person you want to be speaking to. And I use an example of, say, some of the clients I have on the lower North Shore. If you're looking to buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Mossman, well, you don't call Jeff Smith from Ray White. Jeff's selling waterfronts for $20 million. Right? And so it's not that he will disregard you. He's one of the nicest men in real estate. It's just that he has his path and you have yours. So it's a matter of making sure that we find out who our agents are that are selling that specific product, and we tell them what it is. I mean, one of the most common things I get from buyers is, Jesse, I feel like I wasn't given an opportunity on this. And I said, okay, did you talk to the agent and tell them you're interested? God, no. Why would I do that? And you go, how are they supposed to know you're interested? Right? So unless you're divulging some information, and I appreciate that you're going to want to hold some things back, the agent can't read minds. You have to be clear with an agent about what you want, why you want it, and watch the agent go to work, or your buyer's agent, go to work for you when you are clear with them about what you want, what your budget is, and what your time frame is to purchase that property.
Yeah, you've got to give something to get something, right?
That's the better way to put it. You've got to give something to get something, yes.
Someone's selling an asset that's maybe outside their norm, but there might be an opportunity that the price would be a little potentially under?
Short answer is yes. Yeah. Funnily enough, I was talking to a mate of mine about this the other day. I always think, and I've got to be careful because I do a few of them, I always think out-of-area agents struggle to price assets in different areas. That's just, and that's not because that agent's a bad agent, it's just because they're experienced in a particular market. So if they're selling in Mossman and you want to move them across to Leichhardt, they're going to see different things. It was the same way from a buyer perspective up where I live. I live up in a little suburb called Avalon Beach, up in the northern beaches. Now, when all the eastern suburbs money ran from the eastern suburbs up to the northern beaches, they were walking up into Avalon and say, well, you're telling me I can buy all this for $3.5 million and I was going to buy a terrace for $4 million. And you go, yeah, and you get 700 metres up here. Now, what they didn't ask was, hold on, is it worth $3.5 million? Rather than coming from a market where everything's worth $4 million, you come up here, you get 700 square metres and you go, geez, this is great value. And so there was a lot of mistakes made, I believe, in that COVID period, particularly 2021, where buyers were coming from out of area, from more wealthy areas into cheaper areas, and thinking they're getting bargains because it's not the same price, but it's not the same area. And so as a result, there's a discrepancy in the price. So to answer your question, not always, but certainly that's where some opportunities open doors for you. Absolutely.
So just quickly, just before we open up the strategies, just for those who are intimidated by auction, what are the benefits for going to the auction, and bidding for a buyer? Yeah, no, and it's funny. I actually have a little slide that I put up on this. The benefits for an auction for a buyer are less so than they are for a vendor and for an agent. I want to make that clear from the outset. This is a process that has been designed to benefit the owners by putting buyers in a competitive environment. There's no doubt about that. But at the same point, there is benefits to a buyer. The number one benefit is transparency. It's knowing for a fact that you are able to see your competitors. And can I just give a little case study? Yeah, for sure.
I had an example the other day. Does everybody know what EOI is? expressions of interest. So typically used in a higher priced market, but also from agents that just are not quite sure the way it's going to work. So they figure, let's just keep it all behind closed doors. We can control everything. But what they don't realise, and this is just anecdotal from my life, is that I don't for a second pretend that buyers love auction. I don't pretend they love it. But what I can tell you is they like it more than they like EOI. And that has been told to me on thousands of occasions throughout my career, where buyers just feel that there's too much closed door, behind closed door action where they just don't know what goes on. And then suddenly they get a call from the agent saying, oh, mate, the offer's now 6.8. And you go, well, what do you mean the offer's 6.8? The last offer was 6. How did we get the other 800? Oh, we just did. And we can't tell you. Now, I'm not saying that the agents are misleading anybody, but from a buyer's perspective, you want to know that somebody else is at that point. So I had an auction for an agency out in Auburn. It was a big commercial one. It was an EOI process, so it wasn't booked with me. I got a call on the Wednesday when the EOI concluded, and they had an offer of, the guide was 9 million, and a guy called up and said, I'll give you 10 million, can we just shut this down, right? Called the owners said, oh my God, that is incredible, sell it. And they said, well, hold on a second, we've just done our job. Just allow us, this just happened 20 minutes ago. Give us a moment to try and see what we can do. They called up the buyers, the second buyer, and they worked out there was sort of 3 top ones and 4 or 5 bottom ones. They were all sort of sub 9. The offer went from 10-1, 10-2 with a third buyer, and then the first buyer went to 10-3 at that point. Now, at this point, the agent was going, could this become a Dutch auction? I don't want to be the guy that's misleading people, right? Which I totally understand. I get the call and they say, Jess, we're in a bit of a pickle. This is what's happened. What do you suggest? And I said, I suggest that you call everybody and in 36 hours at 10:30 on Friday morning, we tell those 3, no one else, we tell those 3 to meet us on site. And we run a public auction, right? They called all the buyers. The agent said, oh, well, these buyers are going to freak out. All 3 of those buyers said, oh, that's amazing. At least we know we're paying what we're supposed to be paying. So that was the first good sign. We then turned up to that auction out in Auburn, a massive industrial site that it was. We sold it for $14 million. 14 million. This is only 3 months ago, right? So this stuff isn't, and I could give you countless examples as to EOI transitions that this happens to. And so it's an example how behind closed doors without the pressure, people were holding it 10, 10, 1, 10, 2, 10, 3. But once you put them in front of other people that are willing to pay the same money, and I think this is a market more so than anything that's requiring more social proof than ever before. And that's probably worth mentioning across the board is that, and by social proof I mean the buyers are happy to pay you 2.4 million if he's willing to pay you 2,380.
Is there another
But
guy?
if the next guy's at 2.2 and I'm asked to pay 2.4, no. I want to make sure that somebody else is willing to pay the same money that I am. And it's one of the biggest challenges that buyers have is that when I turn up to a property to buy it and I'm the only buyer, I go, you beauty. Now I can use every single tool in my arsenal to try and buy it as cheaply as possible because I'm comfortable in what I'm bidding on, I'm comfortable in the due diligence that I've conducted, and I don't need anyone else to like it. I need to like it, right? But a lot of people then probably...
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and people consistently feel, buyers consistently feel, if nobody else is there, the first question they ask is, what's wrong with it? It's the first question they ask. What have I missed? Why am I the only person that likes it? Rather than licking their lips and saying, look, everybody might have been sleeping on this one. I'm comfortable with it. Let's rock and roll. Use that to your advantage in terms of a negotiation. If there's no one else there to push you, there's your position, and make no mistake, you are, as buyers particularly, going to be in the box seat in the next 12 months. You already are. We're seeing it time and time again. There's no, from a buyer's agent's perspective, I think you would have noticed a pretty big transition over the last couple of months. Is that probably about right?
100%.
Yep.
But I completely agree with what you're saying, that transparency, but I prefer to go to auction than anything.
There you go.
But you're talking about EOI.
Lloyd buys a lot of properties, by the way.
That's the
So does Nate. So does Dan.
The EOI process is the same as when you put an offer to the agent and they come back and say, someone else put it on a higher offer and it goes backwards and forth. Like, you never know whether that agent is telling you the truth, whether they're misleading you or not.
Absolutely.
And it's the fact that you don't know whether they are or not is the issue. And when I go back to my client and say, well, there's another higher offer, so I've been told, there's no social proof for that.
Yeah.
Going to the auction, we obviously have our walk-away price, but we know where our ceiling will be and what we need to do. But with that social evidence, that social proof, we know that someone else is willing to pay that. If we've got that budget and we've got the property, we're happy to do that because we're
Yep.
getting into a Dutch auction.
And it also, to add to your point, it also gives you confidence that should you ever need to sell it, someone's going to be interested in buying it, right? I always find that anything that's easy to buy is hard to sell. Anything that's hard to buy is easy to sell. Does that make sense? So by that I mean, if you've got a heap of buyers that are interested in an asset, when you're trying to buy it and you eventually buy it, you know that probably when you resell it, there's going to be a fair bit of interest on it because there was a lot of interest last time. Now, there's ebbs and flows to that. You know, if you're buying in 2021, there was interest on basement storage areas if you could sleep in them, right? So it's not always the sort of be all and end all, but I do think that's an important thing to live by. If it's hard to buy, then it's probably going to be easy to sell.
Okay, interesting. All right, for those newer to the auction environment, we did prepare a slide on just what to do if you're attending an auction. You can Google AuctionWORKS pre-auction checklist for a more detailed version of this, but there's essentially a few key things that you need to do. So the first, get loan approval, know how much funding or financing you actually have. Number two, Nathan, my good friend, is a property lawyer, so get your contract reviewed, pre-negotiated, figure out who is actually going to be on the title, who's going to own the property. Number four, have the deposit ready. So back in the day, you'd actually go to the bank, draw up a bank check. I mean, I've done that.
Yeah, many times.
Today, real estate has moved on from that. They can direct debit your 10% deposit at the auction. As long as you've got money in the account, so you've got to make sure.
And on that, I might just make a quick point here. One of the big issues for us was we'd run an auction and let's say it sells for $800,000. And the buyer's sitting there during the negotiation says, I don't have any more money. That's it. 800's all I've got. That's all I can get to. Oh, and you say, oh, okay, great. And then suddenly knock the property down, they buy it. And then you sit down with them to sign the contract and then they give you a deposit for $90,000, which probably tells you that they had another $100,000 to spend, right? And so what this does, death pays. And so it avoids that awkwardness. It avoids the $26 you've got to pay for a bank check, but it also avoids the uncomfortable position that you have of trying to work out how much you're willing to pay and getting the maximum deposit to give it away. If you don't have to give away the deposit, don't. It's your money. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, it used to be pretty annoying because you might not win the auction and you went to the bank.
Yeah. Got to start all over again, yeah.
Bring your ID, so bring your driver's license, and then make sure you register on the day. For residential auctions, if you do not register, you cannot bid. And then finally, if you can't be there, get someone to bid. So obviously, someone like Lloyd or Dan can help you out as well. All right, a question that's not asked yet, but maybe, so we're going to move into auction winning strategies.
Can I just make one quick point, Tommy? One of the things I want to talk about is the names on a contract as well. There's something Tommy, I told this story to you a couple of weeks ago. I have a client that I work with in a pretty heavy overseas market in Strathfield, and they turned up. We do auctions all the time, and we had an overseas investor who didn't turn up with their driver's license. And the agent said to me, he goes, "Can you believe this idiot turned up without his driver's license?" And I said, "Did you tell him to bring his driver's license?" He said, No. And I said, "You're an idiot. Don't blame the buyer for not knowing that they have to bring information if you're not going to deliver them the right information." The system that we run here is different. If you're from the US and you come here, you think what we do in terms of auction is bananas. That makes no sense to them because the only properties that go to auction in the US are distressed assets, people that are going broke. So making sure that you've got that names to go on the contract is super important. Because let's say that my wife and I buy a property, I'm not there on the day, so she bids on it. I then want to add my name to the contract later on. Well, there could be a second stamp duty implication to that. There genuinely could be, right? So these are the things that you've really got to be aware of. And when you get a pre-auction checklist like this, it's pretty simple. Just tick each box as long as you're comfortable with it, as long as your lawyers are happy to proceed, as long as you've got your finance approval, then bid with confidence. But again, too many people, I think, just look over this. And the only other point I want to make here is deciding your budget and max bid is one of the most important things that you will ever do when you're bidding at auction. It's a very, very emotional environment. I don't mean to be cheeky, but we're pretty good at what we do. And we know and we know how to convince people to spend more money than they want to spend, right? And I'll give you an example, right? A good agent will walk up to a buyer that they've been dealing with for 4 months, that hasn't bought for 4 months, the bid's at $1,425,000, and they walk up to that buyer and they say, John, you've been looking with us for 4 months. You've been unlucky for 4 months. You've missed out on every auction that you've been to. Is it not worth getting your Saturdays back for another 10 grand? 10 grand and you'll get your Saturday back. But we all know that it's not 10 grand, it's 1,435 grand. So it's a little bit more than 10, right? But what happens is the psychology of the buyer sits there and goes, yeah, for 10 grand, I think I do want my weekends back. I've kind of had enough of this process, right? So there's tools that we implement, particularly with making no apologies, by the way. I work for the owner and that's how I operate. In an ethical way, of course. So you've just got to be really, really careful about setting a budget and sticking to it. If you hit your number, you stop. That is really, really important because this is how people get into overpaying, they get into the emotional thing of it, and if I'm really honest, it's kind of fun, right? Has anyone bid it on eBay? It's kind of cool at the back end of it. So, you know, that's what it's about. Anyway.
My wife had a giggle because I'm that guy where the agent will go up, do you want your Saturdays back? And I'm like, yes, please.
You can sell me anything. I'll buy anything. I'm the easiest guy in Australia to sell to, just because I go, you know what, it's a bloody good point. I'll do it for another 20 bucks, let's do it.
Yeah, so if you haven't been auctioned before, that's probably the first thing that I had to get used to, like back in, I don't know, 2015, like an agent walking up to you to...
Yeah, you get used to that.
I didn't expect that. I thought, you know, it is like eBay, yep. Or like, I don't know. I know the auctions you see where you're just, you're bidding, but agents actually will talk to you. You know, there's a bit of psychology involved, conversation involved to get the highest bid. So that's something...
Or not talk to you. I mean, and I'm not giving away all the tactics, but, you know, sometimes one of the things we'll do, let's say we have two registered bidders, one of them's a good one and one of them's a bad one. I make sure that we talk to the bad one first. Every time. Everyone goes, why? Because I want to make sure that the good one knows that he's not the only one. You're not the only one that likes this. And so we work across, and that's just a psychological thing, right? So these are the little things that are implemented, and just keep them in mind.
Okay, so...
What if the name on the contract is a company or a trust?
Not a problem. You just, if anybody's bidding on behalf of a company, you just have to, and it's a New South Wales requirement, you must provide an authority to bid on behalf of that company. Now, this is one of the most ludicrous rules in New South Wales real estate, but let's say I'm a single directorship here at AuctionWORKS. Let's say I buy a property, an office here in the city. I have to authorise myself to bid on my company's behalf. And a trust and a superannuation fund, anything like that is all authorising. It's ridiculous, but you're authorising yourself to bid on your own trust. And so that's very black and white. So always making sure that we got the authority forms. And guys, I mean, your buyer's agents will have these sort of docs as well. But if you don't have them, jump on our website. We don't charge you for them. Print them off and take one of ours and take it to your auction. Simple as that.
So maybe a question on everyone's lips. Is it worth even having a strategy in the first place?
Yeah, so...
Does it matter?
Yeah, and so one of the things, and this is probably the hardest thing I'll say today, right? Strategies are important, strategies matter. But there is one thing that matters more, and that is that the best strategy to win at auction is to have more money.
You got to talk to me for that.
Right? And so, you know, I can see parties that come along with these great strategies, but at the end of the day, the person with the most amount of money nearly always wins. Right?
Nearly always.
So that is the first thing. And that's not a nice thing to hear, particularly as a first home buyer and you're going up against a downsizer and you're going, gee, and by the way, if you're there with a downsizer, pack your stuff up and move on.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat it, right? Because they're coming out of a $5 million and they think that this $2 million unit is a steal, right?
With change, yeah.
Yeah, and so a strategy is super important, but I think the best way to explain a strategy will not help you necessarily buy it, it will help you buy it cheaper. Does that make sense to everybody? So if you implement the right strategy, you might buy it just a smidgen less than you would have bought it, but you still got to beat Tommy, who's got $5 million today, and you've got to get over him to get $5,050,000. And it's not a nice thing to hear, but typically the person with the most amount of money wins. The strategy plays, and we've got a couple of different strategies that we'll talk to today about it. The most important strategy, I say, and we'll go through these, but is to participate. If you've done 4 weeks of due diligence, if you've turned up to participate at the auction, I promise you the agents and the auctioneer will always work more favourably to somebody who participates. And so that's one of the things where when we had a buyer on Saturday, sat back, did nothing, and then after the auction said, oh, we want to chat to you. And you go, well, guys, no, with the greatest respect. We ran an open auction. There was 5 registered bidders, 4 of them bid, and you didn't. And so now you've waited all the way to the end of auction. We're going to reward Tommy because Tommy was our highest bidder. And we want to reward those for their participation. Every agent in New South Wales is the same. And so it doesn't mean that you have to come in and offer your best number to start. But when they call for an opening bid, the guide's 1.8, you offer 1,750, great, perfect. We've got someone here to buy it. Now, they're not going to buy it at 1,750, but they have shown their hand that they have some interest. And we're going to reward that interest if you participate.
So that's a good segue because that was our first one. So these are the sort of patterns that we see at auction. Actually, I'll add a 6, which is the knockout bid. Maybe
I love that.
One. So yeah, these are the patterns that I see in the auction room. Jesse facilitates this, and we thought we'd run through them. If you have any questions as we go through each, then please jump in. So you already talked about being the first bidder. What's the benefit, Jesse, of being the first bid? Yes, kicking things off, because I'm in here sometimes, you're going first bid and it's just quiet.
Yeah, it's a lonely job sometimes, right? So that's the way it is. The benefit of being the bid is going back to my point. It shows that your intentions. It doesn't have to be the knockout bid. It doesn't have to be, in the peak of the COVID stuff, I remember I had an auction here. This is when monkeys could have done what I did, right? It was an opening, it was a reserve of 475 and I had an opening bid of 1.5 million. And I thought, you beauty, right? This is how it works. And so they're not all like that, right? And so that was a bit of a ridiculous bid. I think it sold for 1.7 or something. It was an undercooked reserve. But the idea of starting first is to show your intentions and show that you are there to buy it. But it doesn't mean that you're going to secure it, and it also doesn't mean that you're going to win the first right to negotiate. What it shows is that you're going to put your hat in the ring, you're going to have a crack at participating, and as a result, us as auctioneers particularly, will always look back to those parties that start us. I make a joke actually at some of my auctions, it's not much of a funny joke, but I always say that the opening bidder always gets my favouritism, right? And I make it as a bit of a sort of tongue-in-cheek comment, but it's kind of true. Right? If you're going to work with me, I want to help you. Whereas the guy that's sitting at the back, with his young daughter and he's being difficult and he doesn't want to bid, well, I don't really want to work with you. That's how it is. I had one last night. This guy, we were waiting for an auction negotiation to take place. And it was all pretty quiet. Everyone was having a good time. It took probably 2 or 3 minutes and he yells out, he goes, mate, can you hurry the bloody hell up? And I was like, holy moly, here we go. And so that was the perfect example as to where you put me offside. It made it pretty difficult for his son to buy the property.
Yeah.
For no reason. And I felt sorry for his son. Now, I wasn't rude, I wasn't nasty, but I certainly didn't focus on him. Now, it went well over their budget, but it gives you an example as to how being an arsehole is not it's not going to work for you. It particularly won't work with an auctioneer. And I actually did a training with some buyer's agents, I remember about 12 months ago. And one of the things I said is, when I see a buyer's agent that I know, they're the ones I want to deal with. Because you know for a fact that they need a deal to get paid as well. They're there to buy it. They're not there to sit there and watch it. And most of the time, 95% of the time, they're very respectful in the way that they go about their business. So they're the ones that we want to operate with because you know that they know what they're doing and that they're actually going to have a crack at participating.
Yeah, it's very subtle, the timing, the waiting, the inviting you to bid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jesse controls that. So.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. The second one, I actually had not bid anything on eBay until the COVID period, and my wife knows I was starting to buy Michael Jordan basketball cards.
Love it.
So the eBay strategy is waiting for the last 3 seconds of the hammer falling or the auction closing, and then coming out of nowhere and being that bidder.
Yeah.
Do you see people do that? And
all the time. And the best way to put it is just be honest. It's a garbage strategy, if I'm really honest. It's not going to do anything for you. The idea is, again, it's not eBay, right? So we don't count down and it's done. If I get a bid, well, we just take more time. We just push it out. So the idea of leaving your best bid right to the last minute is very risky. And in fact, last night was another example. I had 13 auctions in Marrickville last night, and one of the buyers, we'd had a stall in the negotiation. We ended up getting the highest bidder to increase their offer by, I think it was $15,000. We were going to sell it for all money. The guy at the back had told me 5 times he was done. I looked around the room, went first, second, third and final time, selling, and right before I was going to sell, he threw his card up and we just got in. Now, the other guy came back $5,000 on top and ended up buying it.
Yeah.
But this guy, sadly, nearly lost a property by leaving it right to the last minute to be cheeky. And at no stage was that, all I had to be doing, it's a sideways room, so as auctioneers we like to work in square rooms so that my head doesn't have to pivot. It's a laziness thing, I'm sorry. But if you're going right to left, all I have to be is first, second, third and final time, all silent and done, sold, for me to miss that bid right side. That's all that has to happen. Right? So it's as easy as that. And so any buyer's agent or any experienced buyer will tell you that strategy is a very, very risky one to play. And I really don't think it gets you any benefit. But happens all the time. Nearly every day, to be fair. Yeah.
So it's better to go with the flow in the auction.
Go with the flow. And one of the things, and I think it's more the tennis rally one, which I'll talk to.
Nadal
Now let's talk
retired.
about tennis rally, because I think this is one of the big strategies that I give. Tennis rally is, I assume, coming straight back, right?
Yeah, coming straight back toe for toe.
Yeah.
20s,
and so
20s,
I always
10s,
say one of
10s.
the big strategies is to respond in what the previous bid was immediately, right? So it's 1,210,000, 20. And then you allow them to sit on it. 1,220,000 is the bid. They're now thinking 220 is the bid. 1,220 now holds it right side at 1,220,000. Who'd like to make it 30? At 1,220,000, 30, 30, 40, bang, 1,240,000. And all that the buyer on the right side thinks is this guy doesn't have a budget. And I want you to know everyone's got one, right? All they're doing is convincing you that they will not stop. And at the end of the day, they will. I see it all the time. I see buyers that bid hard, bid quickly. So I always find that the previous increment, responding as quickly as you can, will be it's a great strength move. And also it means that you're not overcooking it, right? So if they went 5 and you went 50, well, it's probably not a great move. If the auctioneer was willing to take a 5, move in 5s, advance in a 5. But make it quick, make it fast. Because also that shows that you're prepared. You came with a number in mind and you're going to bid to that number. Whereas I'm staggered with how many people come to an auction and go, yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to pay. Yeah, really?
That's my,
That is risky when you're walking into a room with me. Yes. So you've got to be really careful about that, because it is a risky move if you're walking into a room with experienced operators. So yeah, come back as quickly as you can and respond in tow. And it's not disrespectful, it's not 10, yell it out, it's just 10, 20.
Yeah, that speed.
30,
of reply.
40,
Yeah.
50, 60, straight back.
Okay. All right. This is one I've seen deployed sometimes in the auction room. If I may, Andre, I know you're good at this one, which is it's a combination of the eBay strategy, which is you participate, but you wait. You're still in it late in the game.
Yeah.
And then no matter what the other guy comes back at, you just throw a 1.
Yep.
You want
tennis rally with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the eBay with tennis rally with grinder.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
So, and you just grind out
Yeah, and look, by the way, as much as I'm an auctioneer, there's no doubt that it's in my best interest to encourage people to participate. I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes with that. Of course it's in my benefit. But at the same point, there are lots of people that turn up to auctions and say, right, I'm educated, I know what I'm doing, I'll just let everybody run their steam out and I'll come in at the end. And that strategy is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with coming in after a 1. And often you'll find that the 1 that Andre will throw down will not be at 1,270,000. He waits until I say, well, ladies and gentlemen, good news is we're selling today. 1,270,000, once, twice, 71. Knowing that I probably wouldn't have taken the 71 until I told them I was selling it. And the moment that you're selling it, you know that the owner is now willing to take that number. So sometimes, well not sometimes, nearly all times, increments come down. Because everybody goes, I don't need to give a 50, he's happy at this number, right? And that happens all the time. And that's one of the numbers that we see where owners they just want things to kick off after they go on. They don't always, right? Sometimes you call it on the market and that's it, you hit your number. Particularly in this market. So yeah, that's just, again, the grinder as a strategy is one that I would only use if I was experienced and I had done my due diligence on my value.
Yeah, you're changing the momentum intentionally
Yeah,
of the auction as
correct.
the buyer.
Yeah, correct. And even the wild card kind of brings us to that one as well, because that's an interesting one.
I'm this guy.
Yeah, Tommy's the last guy.
I'll bid the random number.
Yeah. So then the wild card is the random number, right? Everyone's seen the block auctions, that idiot that throws out those silly numbers, right? Yeah, I hope he's not here today. I don't think he'd be sitting here. But that idea of throwing out random numbers to cook your auctioneer.
I'll tell it's not too random, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, but it'll sometimes it'll work. In an inexperienced auction, it'll work. You'll get an auctioneer that'll falter to it, right? But when you, and I don't mean to be cocky here, if you throw that at someone like me that's been doing this for a long time, I mean, I talked to you about the card game, right? So when I want to get my numbers good, I get a deck of cards and I put different numbers on the deck. So I'll make 10 will be 10.5 or 7 will be 7.5. And then I work out whatever the number will be, Queen will be 25, King will be 50, Ace will be 75. That'll come up to a deck of cards with a number. It might be 478. Every deck of cards will be different because everyone will have a different number that they'll put on each one. But then what we do to practice my numbers is I then turn them over and I dump them. 7, 15, 28, 47, 72, 98, 56. So you're not going to get me, right? But you are going to get some of them. And so I don't mind the strategy of it, because what it does do is stall things and it just creates a bit of an uncomfortable environment in terms of the auctioneer trying to stay ahead of the game as well. And show your numbers as well, it's worth mentioning. Your numbers, so your
so the method to my madness is to try and think 2 bids ahead and kind of go in between.
Yeah.
No, okay, the number of 888 bids we see is pretty common.
Yeah, it's all the time.
Yeah, or like the 1,880,
all the time.
But I've more tried to think 2 bids ahead, just to test the appetite of the competition and kind of wedge them. Are they going to go in say they're bidding in 10s, are they going in a 10 or 20, and then maybe throw a 12?
And so what a good auctioneer will do as well is, so they're good ones, they're fine increments. But when the buyer's going 8,692, I just counter and say, so I just need to know the exact number. What's that number? Didn't think you knew it, so I'm not going to accept it. Do you know what I mean? If you don't know what you're bidding to me, I'm not going to accept your bid, right? Because at the same point, I understand you're trying to be a smart ass, but at the end of the day, I need to represent the owner. And if you don't know what the number or price is that you're jumping the bid to, well, I don't think I'm doing the right thing by my owner by accepting that bid. So there's nothing wrong with it. But if someone says to you, 1,288,000, and they say 16,500 on top, then a lot of the time is, okay, what is it? So it's 98 and 704, and then you're off and away, right? But some people will always just stuff that number up. So yeah, that's how we check them on it, is just go, guys, that's cool, number please. You don't know? Okay, so what is it? So then we can confirm from there. Right. But no, great strategies here, and they're all just different strategies that everybody uses. And I think, particularly on these strategies, Tommy, there's a little bit of everything that you can sort of take from. You don't have to do it the one way. You don't have to be the first mover. You can take a little bit of everything. I'd probably not like to see too much of the eBay stuff, but if you can take a little bit of everything else, this is how you get better at auction. And the final thing I'll say about strategies of winning at auction, if you're going to go and buy at auction, if you can, find out who the auctioneer is that is going to be conducting the auction that you're selling and the agency, and spend a bit of time in the 2 weeks leading up to it just going to a few of their auctions. How does this guy operate? Is he a grumpy old bastard? Is he lovely? Is he a friendly young guy? Does he shut down low bids? And so what that'll do is, 1, make you comfortable with that auctioneer, but 2, make sure that you don't do anything that gets you embarrassed. I remember, I'll tell a quick story. I remember there's an auctioneer in Sydney, I certainly won't mention who it is, a competitor of ours. I turned up to an auction, there was this lovely young couple who asked a pretty dopey question, really. They said, I was wondering if the garden shed was included, right? Now, yes, You can't lift it up and move it. It's a fixture and a fitting. The answer is yes, right? But the auctioneer turned around and said, and it was the girl asked the question. She said, "Excuse me, auctioneer, I was just wondering if the garden shed was included." Now, she asked it in a very pleasant, lovely way. And the auctioneer turned around and goes, "You've had ample time to do your due diligence on this. I can't answer that question." And then just shut her down. This poor lady at the front nearly started crying. I was like, what an asshole, right? Be nicer, right? So if you're asking questions, and a lot of the time as auctioneers, we will answer the objection asked of us the way that it was asked. If you ask a pleasant question, I will respond in a pleasant manner. But if you're going to try and control our auction or shut us down, then be ready for a fight, if that makes sense, because we can't lose control of our auction environment.
Jesse used to play rugby, so you don't want to pick
No.
Yeah. All right. Look, let's throw it over to the room.
Yeah.
It is time, so it is 1 p.m. if anyone has to go.
Yes.
But, questions? Yeah.
Obviously, we've known each other for a while. But
We have?
I want to ask you this question.
Yes.
From a vendor strategy point of view, what are your views, and do you like the vendor bid, or would you prefer other methods such as disclosing the reserve price to get things going if the auction store?
Yeah, outstanding question. So vendor bids, I think, are used in well, you can use them in 3, but the main 2 are, 1, to start the auction. So that's always at a conservative level, right? So if a vendor bid is used at your auction, it's normally at the start, it's normally at the bottom end of your guide. Guiding 1.6, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking 1.6 throughout the campaign. My vendor bid is 1.6, beat it. We can't be any more clear or open and honest with you, right? And that's good, that's consistent. That shows an agent that guided one thing and is expecting the same thing, right? So it's the opening bid. The second option is to continue momentum, but this is an option I don't like. So it's when it goes 1,250,000, the bid 1,300,000, 350,000, 1,400,000, no advance at 1,400,000 buyers. I advance it forward with a vendor bid of 1,450,000. Who'd like to make it 1,500,000 now? Very, very uncommonly is that used. And the reason for that is we always suggest that there's nothing more annoying for a buyer than turning up, doing all their due diligence, participating, bidding, beating all their competition, and then after that you throw a vendor bid 100,000 above them and they go, "Are you serious? I did everything you asked of me. I beat everybody, I bid in your guide, and then you're going to do that to me." So I don't like that option. And then the third option, Andre, is specifically to protect an owner's value. So if we look at that, we say, okay, we decided because there were 6 registered bidders to open the bidding at 1.6 million. The owner wanted 2. And so as a result, nobody else bid. Everybody just sits back and we say, okay, well, the owner wants 2 million. It's not in our owner's best interest to have this property pass in at 1.6 now. It's doing them a disservice. So what I'll do is exercise a vendor bid at 1,850 just to get it back into the realms of reality. So they're the 3 times that I think you're using vendor bids. And a lot of the time, both for buyers and vendors, it's funny it's called a vendor bid. It should be really called an agent's bid, because if the vendor has their right, where do you think they want it placed? Just 1,000 below their reserve. But often that's not what's going to garner them the best result. So that's how I'd answer that.
What does pass in mean?
Pass in is when you don't sell a property at auction and effectively you pass it in, so the auction's closed, right? Now, auction conditions in New South Wales are in place until 12 o'clock of the night of the auction. So if I pass a property in and don't sell it, and then 2 hours later they come to an agreement, it's as if the hammer fell and it's unconditional. Okay?
Didn't know that one.
It doesn't necessarily get around that way.
No.
It goes back to bid.
It goes back, yeah. And if you're on a vendor bid, you'll always pass it in because you can't sell it back to the owner, unless they're stupid enough to buy it back.
And in terms of disclosure, say the bid doesn't get high enough, the vendor puts a bid, gets passed in, and it goes back to market,
Yep.
private treaty. What does the agent have to disclose?
My understanding of that is the agent, if asked, must disclose that it was a vendor bid.
Yep.
I think
If asked.
yeah, I believe so. I could be wrong, but I think I did a little bit of work on this a couple of weeks ago. And I think, look, there's no doubt that some agents will then come back and say, look, it passed in at 1.8. But they'll forget the very important fact that it passed in at 1.8 on a vendor bid.
Yeah.
It wasn't a real live bid. Yeah, you do need to disclose it. Okay, great. So that means I'm right, which is it's pretty rare, which is great. But I think one of the things is the disclosure must be there that it passed in on a vendor bid, that it wasn't a live bid. So I think there's a little bit of some agents that need to tighten things up a little bit on that.
Directly asking.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Hey, can I just confirm, was that a vendor bid? No, it wasn't. It was a live bid. Great, perfect. Thank you. Great. And and it's funny how good quality agents can get easy information out of good quality buyers can get easy information out of inexperienced agents. I'll give you an example. Is any agents in the room today?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I look straight at you. What price? What's a guide that you've got on at the moment? A property you've got on the market?
Oh, guide.
No, yeah, just any guide. $500,000, 500 grand?
Yeah.
Righto. So what an experienced buyer will do is they'll call up the agent and they'll go, mate, what a cracker this thing is. Yeah, oh, you like it? Yeah. Geez, you're the first one to like it all month. That's great, perfect. Right, we might have a buyer here. So they're excited, right? And so they sit there and they go, okay, great, perfect. And what's the guide? Oh, we're guiding 450. Okay, perfect. Now, I've got a question for you. If I walked in today and made an offer of 520,000, would I buy it? Right? Now, an experienced agent handles it very differently to an inexperienced agent. An inexperienced agent goes, what? I'd reckon, yeah, I reckon the owners would definitely take 520. Do you want to come in and do that? All right, mate, thanks very much. Have a lovely afternoon. And now I've just found out what your owner will take. Just like that. Right? Whereas an experienced agent goes, well, look, what I can do is I can put that offer to our owners, but a couple of things that need to happen. One, I need that offer from you in writing so that we can formalise that offer to our owners. And secondly, I need to speak to my owners about their willingness to accept that offer. What I can tell you is that the offer is certainly within the realm of where they're considering, but I can't give you any answers about that yet. See the difference in an experienced versus an inexperienced? Simple as that. And if you're an experienced buyer or buyer's agent, there's no doubt you guys are using that stuff, particularly on somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. Because, and I mean this with respect, you can tear inexperienced agents down and get every single bit of information you need if you know what you're doing. And that's not what I suggest. Agents are what keep me paid, right? But that's why I look after my agents to make sure that they're experienced in answering these questions properly. It's the ones that aren't that get crucified.
Anyone else?
So,
Yeah.
Come to the next question. How do you identify unexperienced auctioneers?
Watching them, pretty much. Watching good ones and then watching inexperienced auctioneers. Look, I must admit, we're pretty looked after here in Sydney. We've got some really great auctioneers. There's no doubt that there's some sort of juniors coming through that are learning. One of the things that we have in Sydney is a distinct shortage of auctioneers, which is not something I should say often because I reckon there should be way less so I can earn more. But at the end of the day, there is a shortage, and there's one reason there's a shortage is that the new property training reforms that came in place have meant that an auctioneer must have 12 months of experience in the industry before they call a property auction, which is a fantastic addition. But what that's meant is all the kids that call me up and say, mate, I heard I can make X amount of dollars just on a Saturday, can I come work for you? And you go, yeah, are you aware that you've got to spend 12 months? Oh, and then I never hear from them again. Right? So typically that stuff happens all the time, and so it's a nice way for me to work it out. So to find out an experienced auctioneer, go and see them, go and watch them. Yeah, and you'll see people do it well and badly. And guys, one of the things I want to say is, whilst I'm well regarded in what I do, I don't think what I do is I'm the only one that can do it. I don't think that there's anybody else out there that isn't doing a great job. I just think that there's different styles of auctioneers. I'm a country guy, I'm a little bit more conversational, I'm a little bit more chatty, that's my style. But then if you go to some of our competitors, say in the eastern suburbs, it's a little faster paced. And that's all right, they're not doing the wrong thing, they're just different. That's all. And so it's the same in real estate as well. And I always say to my guys particularly, don't talk about other auctioneers in a bad way. They just do things their own way. And it's the same way that you guys have your own individuality in your businesses and your jobs.
All right, last question, or last two, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah. Joanne.
So I have a question about setting your maximum bid.
Yep.
That sounds like the magic number in the auction strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Because an auction is inherently competitive in nature.
Yep.
Would you accept that you have to pay a little bit above the market value of the property? Like when
no. The short answer would be no. I think you've always got to make sure that you're paying whatever the market price is for the number. But the best way I can answer this is this. The strategy I give to finding out your max number, let's say they're guiding 1.2 million. I always say that never make your limit an even number. because I can almost guarantee you there's 2 or 3 others there that have got the exact same number. And so what happens is if you're at 1,295,000 and Tommy, who's conveniently bidding against his wife, is now bidding at $1.3 million, well, suddenly you're out. But if you make your budget 1,310, suddenly you can go to 1,305. His limit was 1,3 and he's done. So I always say when you're making a limit to bid at an auction, make it just over the even number. If your limit's 1,250, make it 1,255. Right? The amount of times I see that extra 1,000 buy a property is staggering. And so a lot of the time around that, it's about making sure that your budget number is slightly over the figure. But I think you always want to be ensuring that you're paying market dollars. But also, auction normally garners you market dollars. Typically, it's going to get you the right amount of money for what the market is because that's what the market paid today, right? And as a country guy, right, this is how I explain auction, right? Imagine, and you guys will get this, okay, imagine I'm in the stockyards in Young or I'm selling some apples today, right? Now I've got a big box of apples that I'm selling. If I don't sell that box of apples today, what happens to them? They'll rot, right? What happens to property when it stays on the market? It rots, right? It rots. It starts to get a stench. Everyone goes, what's wrong with it? Why didn't it sell? What's wrong with this one, right? So auction is just that. The idea and the mentality for agents and for anybody selling by auction is that we need to sell this today. Otherwise, in the due course, it's going to develop a bit of a stench. It's going to be more difficult to sell. My apples will soften up and they won't be as tasty to eat, right? That's all it is. That's all it is. And so if you can take that very basic understanding, and that's why auction has worked for thousands of years, is because that's how people sell. They just know that they can turn up and we're selling these items today and that's what it is. Go back to the box full of sunscreen. Do you know what I mean? Somebody bought it for $1.50. Somebody felt it was worth $1.50. Now I didn't. I thought it was a complete waste of money. I reckon it was more petrol to take it home, to be honest. But that's the way it is. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether there's any benefit of picking your own auctioneer and not letting the agent.
Great question. I think that is always the owner's right to determine the auctioneer that they work with. One thing that I think is important to me to say here without being too self-focused is that the relationship between the auctioneer and the agent is very, very important. And so if what you're doing is bringing in your auctioneer into an environment where these two won't work well together, then no, it's not in your best interest. But if you're working with someone, say like me, who works with new agents all the time and spends time with my agents prior to make sure that I understand how they operate, how they do things, then no, that's not a problem. But again, if you're bringing in a certain personality that's going to conflict in any way with the agent that you've got, then it's probably going to be a disservice to you more so than having the guy that they use.
I say that because if there are agents try to force you to sell at an auction, that's what I'm doing, they can move on to the next property.
Sure.
The issue that I've had in the past is that the auctioneer is in league with the agent in trying to force you to sell.
Yep.
So having your own individual auctioneer can bring in an element of independence.
And I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point that you make. I mean, we're independent auctioneers. That's what we do, right? But at the same point, I make no illusions that I back the agents that I work with. I mean, I'm very lucky that I think I work with some of the best agents in Sydney. So the people I work with are great. But I think you make a good point. And it's hard to disagree with that point, where you feel that maybe the auctioneer is also adding to that pressure. I think, from my perspective and the way that my team operate, we never put pressure on anybody. I always make it clear when I go into the room that, guys, this is entirely your decision. No one's forcing you to make a decision today, but you have employed me for my advice, and this is my advice. If you choose not to sell it from here, that's entirely your prerogative. But if your idea is to sit back and wait for X amount of reasons, this is why we counter those ideas. But if you're ever in an environment where the owner and the agent the owner and the auctioneer, or the auctioneer and the agent are forcing you to sell, then I think this is really important for people to understand, particularly sellers. No one can force you to sell anything, right? And that's where you have to put, your adult pants on and stand up and say, no, guys, I'm not comfortable. We're going to pass this property aside and I'm going to take a moment to have a think about it. and I'm not comfortable with the pressure that you're placing upon me to sell my property, right? Because this is what I always say. I had a mate of mine list his property, and he said, oh, and he's quite funny. He said, oh, mate, I've got one agent who's at 1.85%. The other guy's at 1.75%. I just don't know what to do. And I go, geez, over 0.1%, you're in this much of a pickle. And I said, mate, just to be clear, you don't pay that 0.1% until you get a price that you're happy to sell for. This idea that people think that you list your property on the market and in 4 weeks' time someone's going to have a gun to your head to sell is garbage. You don't. If you don't want to sell it, don't sell it. But again, we focus on, and good agents focus on the owner's motivation. And when I train agents, I talk about that. At the pointy end of the auction, if I'm trying to convince an owner to come down off their expectations of 1,250, I come back to their reason for selling. And if their reason for selling is to get cash out so they can get the kids a new home, well, my conversation with them is, guys, I appreciate that we're not at reserve at the moment. But what I can tell you is that the original intention that you had to sell this property was to get some cash out to enable your kids to buy a property. We're at that level now. So the good news is that the whole reason you chose to sell is now possible, if you choose to do it. And so what I've done is gone the other way around it. I've now told you that the reason you're doing this is now possible. If you don't want to do it from here, okay, but if you want to achieve the original outcome, here's your chance to do it.
So, quick question.
Yeah.
People say you should never bid against yourself at an auction. I just want to see what your views are on that.
It's funny you say that.
seen it
I
a
did
couple
it.
times.
No,
I've done it myself.
No, I've done it as well. I did it on my first ever unit. I remember it was quite fun. I was playing a game of tennis that night. Passed in vendor bid of 580. Only two buyers, me and another lady. Vendor bid at 580. I went to 581. I ended up going in after auction. This is in Wallara, so I've done pretty well. This shows you how long it was, buying a unit all those years ago back there. Bought it at 585. I've kept it now for 13 odd years or something like that. And I remember I went home, I had a bunch of my mates that used to come around to my house, about 15 of them. We'd go to this big tennis thing, and then we'd go and have a few beers and all that sort of stuff. Quite a few more than a few beers too. Anyway, so we'd come back, and I remember I got back to the house that night, and I was sitting there going, I've ruined my life. I've ruined it. For an extra 4,000, I've ruined my life. Well, it turned out in 10 years' time, the thing doubled. So I didn't ruin anything. So to answer your question, I have no issue bidding on yourself if you are comfortable and you've done your due diligence. If you've done your pricing due diligence, if you're comfortable at the price that you're paying, there's nothing wrong with bidding on yourself at all. Nothing at all. Because at the end of the day, yes, you're competing against your competitors, other bidders, but you've still got an owner to beat. You've still got an owner who has expectations. Yep. And so, yeah, okay, you might have beaten everyone at 1,250, but the owner says, cool, I own it and I'm not selling it under 1,3. So we've got a problem here. And so at some stage, you've got to find common ground with the owner as well. Cool?
All right, guys, just watching everyone's times, we're going to wrap it up. Before we do have a lucky door prize.
Oh, I love that. How good.
Yeah, at SF Capital, we like merchandise, so
yeah, we love merchandise.
We've got an SF Capital Nike golf hat to give away.
Stop it.
So, Jesse, you want to do the...
You should have auctioned.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was thinking. All right. Oh, what do we got?
Yep, what do you have?
Okay, ready? Purple D28. Oh, hey, there we go.
There you go. And Jesse, as a thank you.
Oh, beautiful.
You got one too.
Oh, stop it. Very good.
Yeah, as a thank you. Yeah.
Man, thank you. Guys, thank you so much. Final thing I'll say is if anyone wants to come and watch some auctions every Tuesday, this is the big commercial auction centre in Sydney. We'll have 10 or 12 coming up here next Tuesday. Come in here. Obligation free. No one's going to take your money. Take a seat, sit down and watch some. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Jesse. Yep. Thank you.